Hello. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming on the last evening of conference at our fringe meeting, which is about why a Labour government should spearhead a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. You're going to hear from our panel who like to talk to a little bit about what it is and why they think Labour should be addressing it. Also about that's going to be first of all my colleague David Hillman on my right, and David is the director of Stamp Out Poverty, and he's a founder member of Make Polluters Pay, and also is the UK and also the coalition. Sorry, the Make Polluters Pay coalition, and also Stamp Out Poverty is the UK partner of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And then we're going to come second to Olivia Blake on my left. Olivia is the Labour MP for Sheffield Hallam since 2019. She was previously a councillor and deputy leader of the council in Sheffield. She recently won an award. Let me get this right.
Joking.
Olivia won an award that she's the Climate Coalition's 2023 Green Heart Hero Award, MP constituency champion for her work to create a greener and more climate-friendly Sheffield. And then on my left, we're going to have Paul Mason coming third. Paul is a journalist, a Labour activist, and also a champion of the fossil fuel treaty. He was previously economics editor of both Newsnight and Channel 4 News. And as a freelance journalist, he's written for The Guardian, The New Statesman, The New European, and when it's Paul's term, I'm sure he can fill in any others I've missed out. So, David, if you want to open up by talking a bit about the treaty and explaining what it is and why you think it's important for a Labour government to address it.
I can do that. Great. Thank you very much, Ken. Welcome, everybody. I hope you've had a brilliant conference. Yes, we've got finally to the final evening. So I hope this sets your evening off well. My job is to set the context, tell you that's good, isn't it? Tell you the basics about that. We put that on purpose, you know, tell you the basics about the fossil fuel treaty. And really, this is a vibrant campaign. Many of you may not have heard of it yet, but it's building around the world. I've explained it to you. Then I'm going to come to why a Labour government should play a leading role, not only by supporting it, but by championing it. You know, there will be a time when people look back at the era of fossil fuels when it is a thing of the past. And they'll ask, why did it take so long? Why did it take so long to get rid of this filthy, dirty, toxic form of energy that poisons our air? And I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but air pollution kills more than 7 million people a year around the world. That's more than died in the entire COVID pandemic. So let's be absolutely clear about this. Fossil fuels cost lives. So why do we delay? When we know that renewable energy, that solar, wind, wave, they're clean, why are we dragging our feet? Why put off for a moment longer than is absolutely necessary the ending of the era of fossil fuels? And it's because the fossil fuel treaty will hasten that moment that we are passionately behind it. So what is the fossil? Is one, to end all new exploration and production of oil, coal, and gas. And let's be clear, 89% of global CO2 emissions come from fossil fuels and from industry. Two, to phase out existing production of fossil fuels to keep us within the 1.5-degree global climate goal. And thirdly, to achieve a just transition that enables countries, communities, workers to transition away from fossil fuel dependence, particularly through scaling up access to renewable energy. And let me just unpack the just transition piece a little, as the term just transition gets bandied about a lot. So let's be clear. This means workers, communities, and the least well-off not paying for the energy transition. There can be no repeat of the unjust energy transition cruelly perpetrated under the Conservatives, under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, that decimated mining communities. Those just transition is about learning those lessons, and that under a Labour government, they are not going to be repeated. A transition away from fossil fuels can and will be good for jobs and for trade unions. So where are we with the fossil fuel treaty campaign? Well, it's quite an extraordinary story. In just 2.5 years, it's grown all around the world. It has secured the support of more than 100 Nobel laureates. It's supported by more than 2,000 civil society organizations and more than 3,000 scientists worldwide. More than 80 cities, including Paris, Sydney, Calcutta, Lima, have endorsed the treaty. And I'm delighted to say that London endorsed the treaty in June of last year. London, as you all know, is an economic powerhouse. So getting London to sign up, absolutely key in making that happen. So I think a round of applause for Ken would be great. I know you're embarrassed. But on the 1st of September, a considerably larger economic area endorsed the treaty, and that is the state of California, which I think you'd be surprised to learn what the GDP is of the state of California. Does anyone actually know what the GDP is of the state of California? Paul, you might know.
Is it $2 trillion?
It is actually $3.6 trillion, which is larger than the UK, which is 3.1 trillion. It's larger than India, which is 3.2 trillion. In fact, if California was a country, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world. And in the last year, on top of this, we have now, finally, we have countries that have endorsed. 8 countries have endorsed, including, they're not the big countries yet, but you've got to start somewhere. So we've got Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomon Islands in the Pacific, now in the Caribbean, Antigua and Barbuda, and in Southeast Asia, Timor-Leste. So to the existential nature of the problem, the evidence that our world is warming at dramatic speed and with dire consequences to human, animal, and plant populations in Pakistan, the recent tragedy caused by intense rains in Libya. And just today, I was listening to the radio this morning, and the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew have released a paper saying that almost half of all flowering species are at risk of extinction. That is truly shocking. The reduced climate change is an existential problem, not for our planet. You know, our planet will survive it, but for the species, including us, that live upon it. So to the question, why should Labour spearhead this? I'm going to leave this very much to my fellow panelists to elaborate. But I will say this, it's about leadership. It's about Britain's place in the world. It's about the industrial strategy that the UK needs for this century. It's about building on the decision Labour's already made not to grant any new licenses in the North Sea and going to the next level. It's like we have a good starting point. Labour's already in the zone, but it's up to us. It's up to all of us to convince them to go further. Finally, to the question, is this feasible? Is it doable? Well, I've been campaigning for a long while. There's people in the room who can testify to that. And I cut my teeth on the campaign to ban landmines, which I was told you cannot do. You cannot ban a weapon. Well, we did. We did in 1998 with a landmine treaty. It was prohibiting production, sale, stockpiling, and use of anti-personnel mines. So don't let people say something like this is not possible. It is possible. And it starts with getting countries to champion it. So I would like to see the UK under a Labour government spearheading the cause of the fossil fuel treaty, signing up, becoming a champion, encouraging others to join, helping to create a tipping point that will once and for all consign fossil fuels to the dustbin of history. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, David. I realised actually I forgot to introduce myself at the start. So I'm Ken Penton. I'm the co-chair of Labour's Environment Campaign Zero, where the Labour Party's affiliated Environment and Climate Socialist Society. I do that as in a personal capacity. It's a voluntary organisation, a membership organisation. In my day job, I'm the UK advisor for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is why David mentioned about London, which is very kind of him. For Sheffield Hallam. What I didn't say in the opening introduction is that she's also the proposer of a bill that's currently before Parliament, the Climate Change and Ecology Bill. I mean, there's a lot on nature and also a lot of it on climate change, and particularly on the issue of fossil fuels, and the focusing on restricting average global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial age, which is what the climate scientists tell us needs to be the case if we don't have the catastrophic situation that David said for the species on the planet, including us. So, Livia, can you talk to us about why you think your bill and the treaty align, and why it's something that a Labour government should be doing to ensure we don't go above 1.5 degrees C?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Ken. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here today amongst climate and Labour campaigners from across our movement who are interested in this issue. The science has never been clearer. To avert climate chaos, global heating must not exceed 1.5 degrees centigrade. And to not exceed 1.5 degrees, there can be no new fossil fuel projects. Not in 5 years' time or 10 years' time now. This is what the experts are telling us. But whilst the climate and nature emergency intensifies, political ambition to address the crisis is beginning to stall. Although I was pleased to hear in the leader's speech today that he wants to go ahead. It's great. We are now in a situation where the Prime Minister thinks it is okay to scale back already benches, the green light hundreds of new oil and gas fields, including Rosebank, the UK's largest field, under the guise of addressing the cost of living crisis. New oil and gas won't lower energy bills or improve the lives of my constituents. It will only add fuel to the fire of the climate emergency. Just when we need to be scaling up climate action, the government is watering it down. It is absolutely paramount that we move away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible. And it is vital that we do so through a just transition that protects the lives and livelihoods of workers in the UK and communities across the global south. I've been working with organisations, including trade unions, who represent workers in the oil fields that we currently have and the gas fields that we currently have. And they're clear. They don't want to be left behind. I represent a seat in South Yorkshire. So what was being spoken about Maggie Thatcher's legacy in our communities is very, very real. We still don't recover as quick as the rest of the UK when there's an economic shock in South Yorkshire. That is the lasting legacy of those decisions. And that's something that we absolutely have to avoid for our communities as we move away from fossil fuels. And we need to see the opportunities as well. In the UK, we cannot safely burn all the oil and gas reserves we already have and stay within our internationally agreed commitments. So it only makes sense to develop new fields if the people making such decisions have no intention of sticking to the UK's international obligations to tackle climate change. We need a Labour government now more than ever, and a government willing to deliver on the climate action we need to see, and to do this in a just and transformative way for our communities. And I'm proud of our party's commitments on climate action. We have committed to deliver 100% clean power by 2030. We have committed to upgrade 19 million homes, all the homes that need it, so that families have cheaper energy bills and warmer homes permanently. We've committed to set up a national wealth fund, which will create good, well-paying jobs by investing in gigafactories, clean steel plants, renewable-ready ports, and energy storage. And at the conference last year, we committed to establish GB Energy, a new homegrown publicly owned champion in clean energy generation and distribution. And we have recently committed to a global clean energy alliance to work with other countries to share information, cooperate and share investment to scale up renewables and drive prices down. But of course, there is more we can do and must be working towards. And I'm proud to sponsor and be bringing forward the Climate and Ecology Bill in Parliament. For those who don't know, the bill is the only proposed legislation before the UK Parliament that ensures a comprehensive and joined-up approach to both the climate and nature emergencies. In this now or never moment for our planet, this bill would ensure the UK cuts emissions in line with our last chance to keep global heating below 1.5 degrees, and would see our beloved countryside transform from one which is the most nature depleted in Europe to a vibrant, nature-rich environment with our natural world on the path to recovery by 2030. We have no chance of limiting warming to anything less than 1.5 degrees unless we protect and actively restore nature. They go hand in hand, particularly the critical ecosystems that support life and store huge amounts of carbon, such as our peatlands. I'm proud to represent a community that has peatlands that are being burnt today. About that today, the woodlands that we need to see restored, the seas, the wetlands, as well as our river and soil. For one of the world's most nature depleted nations, we must aim higher and we must do better. The CE bill would ensure that protecting and restoring nature takes equal priority with cutting emissions. The CE bill would deliver a science-led and people-powered plan, a clear way forward for the UK to deal with the emergency, making sure that no one is left behind in the urgent need for a just transition in the UK and globally. It is my belief that we need this bill to achieve Labour's Green Transformation Plan, which will create green jobs, deliver sustainable growth, restore nature, and bring about zero carbon, nature positive economy that works for all. And I am pleased to say that the party have already backed the ambition and objectives of the bill. But there are other commitments we should look at, as is the topic of this discussion today, committing to a global fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty to not only increase fossil fuel extraction, decrease, not increase, obviously, and agree a fair phase out of existing infrastructure investments would send a signal on the world stage. An agreement like this would go further than COPs have managed to. It would accelerate an equitable shift away from fossil fuels to affordable, abundant, clean energy for all, and it would do so in a way that is just, ensuring no fossil fuel worker loses out, and those most responsible for the crises we face do their fair share. Everyone has a role to play in this shared global effort. Labour should lead from the front in this crucial year for the planet to make sure that we have done everything that we possibly can to protect and restore people and planet. Thanks again for having me, and I look forward to the wider discussion.
Thank you, Olivia. And now we're going to turn to our third speaker and final speaker, Paul Mason. As I said, Paul's a journalist and Labour activist. If you just Google fossil fuel treaty, you'll see the wide breadth of people from various walks of life. In the UK, we've got people as diverse as Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Emma, I get this right, the actor from Harry Potter, Emma Watson from Harry Potter. Forgive me, I've never seen a film, but also Paul is a champion of the treaty, which is an interesting choice because Paul's originally from a coal mining community. So tell us a bit about why you think it's important, and Paul, and your story, how you've got to that position.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I'll try and compete with the wind and the Mersey. The story that gets me here, actually, and I was an activist and a trade union activist during the miners' strike, and so I were well aware of what's happened to mining communities since. My dad started down. If you're on your way back to Manchester on the East Lancs Road, if you look to the south of it, there is the last pit head in the north of England. It's the pit winding gear. It's a museum. My dad started down there in 1945, and they were both loved the mining lifestyle that was part of their world. but the one thing they taught me is to love the earth more. And that was true of their lives. They were utterly enraptured by nature. And you should always remember that about miners. That's that they're working down in the darkness gives you a different view of the value of the natural world. I just follow the science. I remember being told by a Lehman Brothers economist in 2003 when the Stern report was just coming out, we think this is a bit over-egged, maybe the GDP effects of even 2%, 2% rise in temperature will probably be 2% a year, 2-degree rise, 2% a year. For me, the IPCC report 2018 was what, and I already knew there had to be radical action, but the IPCC report was the one that just turned it into incontrovertible number one, top of the list for government. And as a business journalist, I can tell you that cynical though we may be about the way business reacts to this, the fact that BlackRock has said, the biggest investment company in the world, fund manager in the world, you are stupid if you are not investing in climate transition is a huge signal. I was with a big insurance company last month, global insurance company. They expect 50% of funds under management in the world, capital of capitalists, to be following ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance criteria by 2 years' time. So speed it up a bit. We need to speed it up because of people like Rishi Sunak. Sunak decided in 2 weeks to effectively cancel, make no bones about it, he has cancelled the net zero commitment. Whatever he says he's done, the practicality is that there is no commitment to meet the legally binding climate target. And by doing that, and the U-turn on HS2, what he's done is, first of all, tried to change the exam question for us winning the next election. And he is trying to reframe climate politics in Britain. And here's how. We, as a party, wisely, I think, have not appealed to altruism. We've not tried to say, love the planet, though many do. We've tried to say there are economic benefits to working people for making the climate transition fast. And they are jobs, they are clean air, they are energy security, and ultimately, when we get it right, cheaper energy. Joe Biden did that. Joe Biden's CHIPS Act, his IRA Act, are all focused around the idea of pulling investment into climate and carbon transformative He's reframing it as a cost. He's saying, and this is true, there's only 3 sets of people who can pay for this. The taxpayer of the future through debt, i.e. borrowing to invest in new technology. The consumer through higher prices for stuff like insulation, heat pumps, higher EV cars and the rest. Or the present day taxpayer through higher taxes. And since as a conservative, he says, we're paying too much tax. Of course, tax is the highest it's ever been. He says, and he's made numerous comments to this effect, it would be immoral to pass the costs to future generations. That's conservatism. Therefore, the cost has to be borne by the consumer of today. That's Sunak's entire logic. And then he comes out and said, guess what, everybody? It's too much. The consumer can't bear the cost, and therefore we have to put back the climate transition. The beauty of a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty that future U-turns like that, had we locked this in when we did the Climate Change Act, you will know, because you've come at a very late hour at Labour conference, you hopefully know that Climate Change Act cannot be repealed without a 2/3 majority in Parliament. That was part of its design. But had we done that through a treaty, a legally binding treaty, if you've been involved in, you will know how powerful treaties are when you come and say, oh, we want to nationalize the railways. Oh, sorry, we can't do that because the World Trade Organization, we've signed a treaty. You can't nationalize things. Treaties have a super sovereign effect. And here's what I think the effect would be on Sunak's argument. Sunak has also argued we don't need to take rapid decarbonisation measures because the technologies aren't there already. And therefore, we'll be spending a lot of money on expensive technologies when in 10, 15 years' time, cheap technologies we don't even know about will come along and make it easier for us to meet our target. That's the first part of his argument. The second is that we've already done enough because we're an early industrialized country. One of the big things about the moral argument behind the non-proliferation treaty is that those who, you know, the carbon that is warming the earth now was dug out of the ground by my granddad's generation and my dad's generation. And all the other things we did, the cotton we planted in the Caribbean, the deforestation we took part in the Indian subcontinent. We have warmed the earth. You're in Liverpool, Manchester, an industrial conurbation that was the center of the world's industrialization process. We did this, and we have a moral duty to lead the world out of it. Now, what does it leading mean? It doesn't mean, it means not doing things slower. It means not saying, because consumers can't pay an artificially created price for a heat pump or an EV car, we can't. Have said it gets you away from the fantasy technologies, the idea that that something will come along, Mr. McCorber. I think it moves us again away from altruism. What should we do? I mean, I've got no illusions. I don't think we're necessarily going to persuade Labour to put the non-proliferation treaty in this manifesto. But if we could get it as party policy, it might be in the next one. And anyway, what we can do is cities, devolved governments, regions, even small communities can adopt it and build critical mass that way. I will finally say it is just the fact that the COP process, I went to COP with Andy Burnham, does not drive this fast enough. If you go in the exhibition hall, and I'll finish here, lovely exhibition of lots of renewable energy and carbon capture and storage and hydrogen. The problem is that if you then go and ask, like, what's the price of this? How many of these could you build in Britain tomorrow? The answer is always not many, and it's bloody expensive. That's the problem. The treaty forces government to turn commitment into legislation. And good on you, Olivia, for your legislation. That's what MPs are there to do, legislate. But once we've got it as a treaty, there can never again be a Tory backsliding. And I'm so concerned about the democracy of this country, about the way the Tories are going to manipulate it. I'm not sure that if we get a Labour government, they'll never come back in. But if we could lock Britain into a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, they could never change it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We've had three good speakers and three really interesting observations, but actually the part of the meetings like this that I always find the most illuminating is the question and answer session.
Yeah. So
we're going to have a microphone. If you have a question, if you put your hand up, if you remember to say who you are, where you're from, if you're representing anyone, and also remember it's a question, not a statement. So I'll pick the woman over there, in there with your hand up. Yep, that's all. I'll pick the gentleman there with the glasses, and gentleman over there on the right. We'll come back for another round of three.
Hi, I'm Imogen from Friends of the Earth. My question
Can
is...
you speak a bit louder, please? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So my question is, will Labour agree and commit that those current licences in the North Sea oil and gas fields cannot be allowed to extract their full contents? And will they make a plan to ensure that, given that they will not look at revoking any current licences, including recent ones such as Rosebank?
So, gentleman over here in the glasses in the second row, Matthew, second from the left. As I'm looking at it.
Thank you. So Chris Hewitt from Solar Energy UK, and I'll declare an interest. I'm also a former chair of CERA, but some time ago. So my question, I guess, is picking up on what Paul was saying. I want to give it a bit of an economic optimism here. Actually, in terms of renewable energy, solar and wind are now definitely cheaper than fossil fuel power generation in this country and the rest of the world. So I think there's a real opportunity. The IEA is actually projecting that there's going to be more investment in solar globally than oil production this year. So we have reached a tipping point, and that tipping point happened during the pandemic. It's very recent. So there is optimism here. The way the fossil fuel sector is being kept going in this country now is by reversing the subsidies that we had in the last 10 years. There's more subsidies now to the fossil fuel sector, tax exemptions, etc., than there is to the renewable sector. So I guess that's my question for Olivia and the politicians in the room, is whether you think Labour will be brave enough to reduce the subsidies for fossil fuels in the UK.
Okay, and the gentleman here on the far right in the glasses.
I'm Sachin Sinha. I'm a trustee of Lancashire Wildlife Trust, but I'm also working with a coalition of NGOs on biomass, opposed to biomass. Just made that clear. I was wondering where the panel stand on biomass when it comes to fossil fuel, because it is a fossil fuel. It is, under climate change timeframes, at least as dirty as coal, if not dirtier. And also in terms of BECCS, which again is a very expensive.
I just want to say, for the people who don't know what BECCS is.
Oh, sorry, bioenergy, carbon capture and storage. Where they stand on that technology, which is incredibly expensive, is unproven, and again is a fossil fuel. Thank you.
If I heard right, it was, will Labour rule out taking out all the oil and gas from existing oil fields? I think maybe, given that no one here is on the front bench, maybe it should be, should Labour do that? Will Labour be brave enough to remove subsidies from fossil fuels, particularly oil and gas in the UK? And also, what's people's views on biomass? I think I might go to you first, Olivia, if that's okay.
Always, that's fine. I think that they're three very important questions, actually. And to take them in reverse order, I think you're right to be a bit cynical about biomass, carbon capture and storage. And I'm yet to be convinced by it in terms of the kind of science that's been presented to me. And when we were sat on the energy bill, the regulations that have now come forward around carbon capture and storage and usage doesn't include usage either. So it's they've put usage in the terminology, but they haven't done any regulations around that, and that's a real area of concern for me. Industry that they've only really regulated so far for half of the journey, which is problematic, to say the least. On biomass more generally, I think given we've got cleaner forms of energy to go for, I don't think that should be the priority for any government. I think that solar, wind, onshore or offshore, other types of renewable energies are much more important, and should be our focus, absolutely. And I think I take your point. It's horrifying how much subsidy oil and gas companies are getting, particularly at a time when my constituents are getting in touch with me about the cost of living crisis, and we're seeing phenomenal amounts of money being paid out in subsidies and a complete lack of investment in green technologies within those oil and gas industries as a proportion of that. And I think that, we've been quite clear that we would have a stronger windfall tax on those profits, which obviously hints to kind of our approach to this. But, there is a lot of subsidies that need looking at, and I think that we have to go in there with our eyes wide open about what that might mean. And I think that the other point about kind of global finance and where people are at, that Paul was kind of illuminating, is there is a real sense that these are all going to end up being stranded assets, and what that means for a global financial system which is based on fossil fuels is huge for our communities. If you think how interconnected we are now on this globe, which has its benefits and system, having stranded assets and not having the discussion around that in terms of government supporting those is really, really quite problematic. And I think something that gets missed in the conversation, especially when you're talking to Conservative MPs. They don't understand the nature of the beast, I think it's fair to say. And yeah, I was really gutted when the subsidies that were there for solar, the block that's come on onshore wind, and the failure of this round of offshore wind in the latest round of funding that was made available, and it's just absolutely a dereliction of duty. Sorry, it's definitely my last panel of the conference, so sorry. But yeah, so I think there's a huge amount there. And on the should, I think we have to have that conversation. I don't think that the conversation can end where it is. I think things are going to get critically quickly if we're not careful. So I think to kind of have one rule today and not be willing to open up that conversation in the future would be misguided. Probably get in trouble for saying that, but I think we always have to keep our options open, and it's really, really fundamentally important to this process that it is just, and that there is a process, that it's not a cliff edge. And I think that Rishi Sunak's kind of, we'll stick to 2050, but we're not going to do anything about it. And it is the complete opposite of what we should be doing. That is going to create the 1980s cliff edge that has affected communities up and down the country, and is the wrong approach for bringing communities with us on this journey as well. So I'll stop ranting there.
Okay, David, have you got comment on
just
those?
a brief comment on this. I mean, with subsidies, we have to make the distinction between consumer subsidies and production subsidies. And as far as production subsidies are concerned, it's absolutely shameful that these should continue. I mean, the fossil fuel industry made 4 trillion in profits in 2022. The idea that they should be subsidized at all, these subsidies need to be redirected to renewables. It's absolutely obvious. So I think I would very much hope that Labour would support that. I'd be very interested to hear your views, Paul, about that, whether they would do that. As far as the biomass question, we often group a lot of things together to do with dangerous distractions. The absolutely clear thing to do is to move aggressively towards renewables and to phase out fossil fuels as fast as we can. You get carbon capture and storage, you get various different things thrown forward, but really they're delaying tactics. And they should be seen for that. And we should concentrate on what will really work.
And Paul?
So I want to thank you. I want to answer this by tangentially. There's 2 approaches in economics to the decarbonisation task, and they're known in the work of the Professor Daniela Gabor of University of West of England, who's world famous for this analogy. She calls them the big risking. That is, we're saying to capitalism, we take the risk out of investing into solar, nuclear, and wind, offshore and onshore, by setting a price that's good for you and giving you certainty for more than a decade, so that private capital can come in and build it out. The people with that money say, and I think they are right, that if you create regulatory certainty, you don't need 28 billion a year. We will provide the 28 billion a year, but we will get an upside and we'll own the asset. Now, people on my side of the debate say that's all fine, but would it not be cheaper for the state to build it out using borrowing to own the asset and therefore be able to control the price? That is, all of these, whether it's Sizewell, it's a Hinkley C, whatever it is, offshore floating wind, it all depends on whether the price is high enough. Now, I'm happy to say, because fiscal dynamics are terrible, that with 4 or 5% bond yields, I'm happy to say, try it the de-risking way. And this is Rachel Reeves's ultimate approach. She made a speech at the Fabian conference where I was in the audience. I think her eye alighted on me when she said, those who think we have to abolish capitalism to get rid of carbon are wrong. that fine, try it your way. But the answer to all these questions, whether it's Rosebank, whether it's biomass, it's a side issue, or whether it's, can we commit labour, is if it doesn't work, what are you going to do? And I think where this will be the most acutely posed is over the national grid. National grid, part public, part private, essentially a private company with a public controlling stake in half of it. Every MP, their inbox is full of what? Emails from AstroTurf campaigns saying no more pylons. No more pylons, no more transformers, no more interconnectors. This is Liz Truss is one of the big people behind this, by the way, Tories. For the national grid to speed up access connections by changing the planning rules so that the Tory NIMBYs can't object to a transformer or a pylon. If that doesn't work, and 2030 is the clean electricity target, I would say to my colleagues in the Labour Party, you have to understand that worldwide, these two methodologies stand at either end of the options. And it's just like if you can't get Barclays to buy Lehman Brothers, ultimately banks have to be nationalised. Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown in 2008 were not left wing. They weren't nationalising banks because they like nationalisation. It's because all the market solutions failed. So my answer to all of them is to you've got to keep the big green state intervention, ownership, and price setting in your pocket. And I think that might be, the argument for the next two Labour terms, which we hope we're going to get.
Okay, thank you very much. And another round of questions. Olivia's got to go in about 7 or 8 minutes, I think.
Yeah,
but we'll try and sneak so very short
I do
questions,
too, sorry.
and then
Yeah.
we'll try and get a round of short answers in. So first of all, the woman on the left there, at the back, with the I can't see. I can see another. All right, so the gentleman there, back in the row, and the lady over here in the second row as well.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Dawn Corrie.
You put your mic closer to your mouth.
Okay, I'm from Crawley Constituency Labour Party. I'm a women's officer and group observer and a climate activist.
And your name is?
Dawn Corrie.
Hi, Dawn.
My question, this is the biggest question of our time, and I'm not going to go on because you all know that. My question is the smallest question. I'm going to do a talk to Unite the Union. I give climate talks. I'm going to give a talk to Unite the Union in a few weeks' time, and I'm going to come across men and women that were of their career. And when I speak to them, they say to me, we don't want to change. This is what we know. We don't want to retrain. We don't want a new job. We want this job. How do I persuade those people who've got a few years till retirement that there is a way that their job role can change? Not how we change it, but how do I persuade them that those individual, that one man times hundreds, how do I persuade him that he can have a new career? It's a small question on a big subject.
Yeah,
I think it's an important question. The gentleman here at the end and on the outside with the slightly hidden, but I think blonde hair. There with long in front of you. No, on your left.
My left.
Sorry, you're right.
I'm all right.
There. You had your hand up, say at the back. I'm with the white.
No.
No,
You
it was
didn't?
the woman.
Sorry, I'm struggling to see.
Yeah,
I'm
it's the
sorry,
woman.
I can't see your face. So forgive me. Sorry, it's the woman. It's the woman there. Sorry. Yeah, I couldn't see you. So all I can see is your hair. You're completely blocked out.
No, that's right. I'm Jackie Solomon. I'm representing Bridgewater CLP. We're down in Somerset. We are surrounded by all of the projects that you are talking about. We've 3 nuclear power stations, none that produce any electricity. We have a tidal barrier that is costing hundreds of millions of pounds now to try and protect the town of Bridgewater from the flood risk from rising sea levels. And we've probably even got a gigafactory coming as well. I'm most concerned, whereas totally supporting everything you've been saying here today, that we don't jump from the frying pan into the fire, that we look at these new technologies and ensure that they are safe for the future. I'm not convinced about nuclear. When you have 3 nuclear power stations and nobody's telling you what they're going to do with the waste, and they're right, within 10 miles of my home, I have concerns about that. I also share the concerns with the gentleman over here about biomass. You can't say it's a distraction.
Okay, and your question is?
My question is, how are we going to future-proof and make sure that the new technologies don't do just as much damage as the old technologies?
Thank you. And to the woman in the second row here.
Hi, I'm Sam Lux, councillor in Nottingham. So in COP26, there was some proposed text to phase out fossil fuels, and I think it was China that said, like, no way, we phase down or nothing. So that kind of got watered down to the point that arguably it's meaningless. So yeah, I just wondered if the panel had any thoughts on negotiation tactics and to what extent this has been or supported by other countries, and whether we have a responsibility or whether the focus should be on making it work domestically to be a shining example.
Okay, and also there was a fourth. I think I only saw a fourth. The gentleman here in the second row. We'll try and skip through the panelists. You can answer which ones you think are appropriate. You don't have to answer them all.
Thank you. Greg Ford from East Hants, and day job working at Finance Watch. Olivia mentioned the risk of stranded assets. There's a legislative proposal that's been tabled twice, once in Canada, once in the EU, to require banks to fund any lending for new fossil fuel. In both cases because of political opposition. If the political winds all line up in the right direction for Labour, it could be an opportunity for Labour to bring such a proposal in the UK and show some real leadership. Is that of interest?
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to come this time. I think it's going to go first. I'll go to Olivia, and then I'll go to Paul, and then I'll go to David.
Okay, quite a lot in there again, and some really valuable points being made. I think just coming back to the jobs issue, I think that's a really interesting point to make about retraining, and I think that it can be quite glibly thrown around that, oh, we'll just retrain everyone and everyone will want that. I think that, and I don't know what I actually think about this proposal, but in one conversation I had with a very similar gentleman, as you've kind of outlined, very near the end of their career, is why don't we pay people to stop working in those industries? And that might sound completely ridiculous, but we do that for farmers. We offer farmers at the end of their career to stop farming so that newer people can come into farming. Like, it's not very well known, and I'm not saying that is the answer, but I think unless you have the dialogue, we're not going to get the right prescription here. And for many people, it's about the opportunities for their children as well. It's not just about those in the sector at the moment. It's about where we're going to, and it's also about, we don't have enough hydrologists in the UK. Like, who knows what a hydrologist does, but they're so important to the nature restoration projects that we want to do and things like that. And if we are going to use nature in our fight for adaptation as well, which is a really important role it can play. So, I'm not saying I agree with that policy idea. I'm just saying it's something that we never heard talked about. But, there are opportunities to talk about these things, frankly. And I think that, we shouldn't leave people behind. And there needs to be an upfront conversation about the ways that we can stop people being left behind and keep wealth within communities as well. I think that, there is a big issue about knowing in the future what we know now about technologies. We can see that with rack concrete. Like, there's no guarantees that in 30, 40 years time we won't be looking at something that we've been producing in this time and being critical of it. But I don't think that should halt our aspirations to research and innovate. I think that they're really, really important, that we do give solar the opportunity to get off the ground, that we do use heat pumps, that we do have the opportunities to kind of invest in these important issues. But But I think we do need to bring communities with us as well. And I think that is a difficult dynamic, and why, as part of the CE bill, we're saying that there should be citizens' assemblies to have these nitty gritty kind of conversations about what can work and how we can build a future for everyone that works for everyone. And there will be compromises in this. I'm not going to step away from that. I think that we have to be honest about that. And I think we also need to kind of, just touching on the final point from Sam, how can we show leadership? Well, it would be nice if we just turned up. I mean, Rishi Sunak's not even talking about going to the next COP, and Chancellor box, but that was worst phrased way of saying that, but and saying I'm going to be the next Green Chancellor, and then completely returning a couple of years later. We're absent from the world stage on this, and we could be doing so much more, and we could be leading in so many different ways in those international negotiations, which I do agree are too slow at the moment, but I'm hoping will quicken at pace as more and more countries realise the significance of where we currently are. This isn't something that's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years. This is happening now in communities around the globe.
Thank you very much. And Paul?
Well, to answer your question, I do have to run in a minute to go and meet some renewable energy people. So sorry, but so just to use an analogy, this country is committed to building a lot of nuclear submarines in Barrow, and BAE at Barrow needs to recruit. I think they're looking at something like 20,000 over a lot of workers. And as they do that, and it's all part of a plan, the Tories up to it. On the radio in Barrow, every so often comes an advert. Western Australia, we're building submarines in Western Australia. The wages are double. The surf, and we'll pay your airfare. It's a very, in other words, capitalism has no problem creating incentives when it wants to. And if we were to say we need to, I mean, this is going to be one of your problems in government. We need to create incentives to find the workforce that's going to build this out. Actually, the workforce that's going to have to change, we can give them incentives to make those changes. And the final incentive, I'll leave you on this. A lot of people my age who are still working are thinking, I'll be retiring in a few years. Where are you going to? One of my mates owns a lovely old 200-year-old furs mill that was built 50 meters from behind the sand dunes, away from the sea line. 2 years ago, a wave hit it. It's worthless. Your caravan will be worthless. That's the problem. Your energy security will be dire as a country unless we make this transition. The frustration I have is that politicians are not prepared to have that. I am, by the way, Labour seeking selection as a Labour PPC, still looking for someone. That's what I will do if I get into Parliament. But I will leave you on that because I do have to run.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. And Dave? And Paul?
Thanks,
David?
Paul.
And David?
Okay, where do I want to start? Let's take Jackie's question.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Thank you very much for coming. I know you're going to dash off. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Okay. So on Jackie's question, which was about risks and threats, I mean, I think that a lot of people have huge worries about nuclear because that's serious. I mean, the risks involved with nuclear, to many people, completely outweigh the benefits, and the fact that they don't economically cost in the irradiated material to the figures. And that's why it draws us back to the opportunities about renewable energy. I was having that conversation with you just before, Louise, that, it's going to renewable energy, going to hot countries that farm the solar, farm the deserts, farm this, gives a huge opportunity to localize energy, to move away from the model of the huge cartels that run the energy industry and believe they have a God-given right to run it. There's no reason why in this particular century where we have to revolutionize our energy production. We have to, for existential reasons. There's no reason why we can't really think out of the box about this. We have got huge opportunities because we're an island. We've got wind energy there. We may not have as much solar energy, but we have wind energy there, and we have huge wave energy, which has not properly been tapped. And we know to the second what happens with the tides. It's quite extraordinary. And we're beginning to see that investment will come there. But this also allows for us to think about more localized and democratized energy going forward. So I'd love to plant that idea, because I think that could be of huge value going forward in this century. And in terms of COP28, yes. Well, COP28. So most people know that it's in the UAE. It is the COP president is Sultan Al Jaber, who's the head of the national oil industry. The peace talks being run by the arms dealer. I mean, how are we going to make progress? On the other hand, at COP27, which was in Egypt that I attended as part of the Make Polluters Pay work, there's a number of people from the Make Polluters Pay coalition here. We've been working with international partners to try to get a loss and damage fund established for those at the sharp end of the climate emergency. And we secured that. Now, we haven't got the money. We've got an empty bucket. We need to fund the fund. However, that was an extraordinary first step and does give you a sense that it is possible, even in this incredibly difficult, this incredibly unwieldy, incredibly difficult situation, it can be possible to prevail. But I would say with the fossil fuel treaty, we're a few years behind where loss and damage got to last year, because it takes a number of years to socialize the idea, to get buy-in, to get your first set of champions. We've begun to see it by getting a first set of countries to go, but we need rich countries. We need countries that have got skin in the game, a country that says we will not, we do have oil and gas, but we're not going to exploit it, because it's better not to exploit it. So that's kind of where we are. I think COP28 will be extremely challenging on this agenda, but there's a lot of people going there and they're going to give it their best shot. Yeah, that's me on that. Am I literally the last person before we wind up?
You are, but I'm gonna sum up. It doesn't mean that you can stay here till 10 o'clock. I was going to sum up unless you've finished.
No, I'll let you sum up.
No, first of all, thank you very much for coming. This is the first meeting time, first time in the Labour Party conference that there's actually been a discussion about the fossil fuel treaty. The campaign for it is only 2 years old. Pacific Islands who've endorsed the treaty, because for them it is quite existential. They will not exist in 30 to 50 years' time, many of them. Also recently, Antigua and Barbuda became the first non-Pacific country to endorse it. Closely followed by Timor-Leste, which is in the Indian Ocean, but it's also the first oil and gas, well, the first oil and gas producer to endorse the treaty. It's really important that I think that we're having this discussion, because it's Paul said maybe not now, but in 2 terms. But we haven't got 2 terms. It's the decisions we make now between now and 2030, which will determine whether we restrict global average temperature rises to 1.5 degrees or not. And as you've heard, the scientists say it will be climate change scientists say it will be catastrophic if we don't restricted to 1.5. So the next Labour government, if we're successful in winning the next election, will have 5.5 years to set us on a path to make sure that we play our part in trying to restrict temperature rises to a catastrophic level. So, as Labour's environment campaign, we've spent a lot of time in the last 4 or 5 years on energy policy, on pushing for a phase out of fossil fuels, because we realised how important it was, and it is. And so we were delighted when Labour said thorny issue about What are we going to do with any licenses that are granted, which might break our carbon budget? I always take the view that, as John Maynard Keynes say, when the facts change, we have to change our mind. And I think so that the situation as we evolve, that we'll need to look at that, but you've got to be in government to make those decisions. But the other commitment that Keir Starmer made earlier this year alongside that was for a clean energy alliance or a clean growth alliance, that we will lead a coalition. And he actually called it a reverse OPEC or an anti-OPEC coalition. Now, if we're going to do that, you want to lead a coalition, you want people to follow you, then you've got to really get your own house in order. And how do you do that? It's about what you're doing yourself at home, but also what are the signals? What are that say that this isn't just a passing phase, that you've signed up for this? And as Paul said, a treaty, once you signed up to a treaty, an international treaty, it is binding in law. It cannot be reversed by an ex-government. And that, I think, for the countries and the developing nations who've got fossil fuels, are saying, why can't we use them? Because you use them, and our people deserve to have they need some sense of certainty that we're not just going to change our mind. And that's why I think, a treaty, having the power of a treaty, will give the type of impetus, the type of confidence that Labour is going to become a global climate leader. So we're not going to have too many, in the sense that we don't have too many years to have this discussion. But thank you for coming tonight. I do hope you tell people about the discussion we've had. This is Labour's Environment Campaign's 18th meeting of this conference. We've got one more tomorrow. We're a membership organisation. We push the cause of environment and climate change and nature within the Labour Party. We're involved in shaping the policies. We can only do that with the support of people. So, who in the room here is not a member, one of our members?
You see, I might not be, which means I definitely will. I'm not sure.
On our lovely panels over there, you can if you get your phone out, you can scan, you can join straight away, because we can't do anything without the resources. But we'll give you an immediate payback. Please, there is drink at the back of the bar. Feel free to help yourself, and thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you very much, Ken.